Hello, my name is Samantha Neal Taylor, and today I'm going to show you how to make a spooky stump. First off, these are our materials. We're going to need a toilet paper roll, some masking tape, some scissors, hot glue, and some aluminum foil. First thing you want to do, you can use any tin foil. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be dollar store tin foil, anything you want. So we're going to take a piece, whatever size you want. It's going to be an organic shape, so nothing has to be exactly the same. And we're going to kind of crinkle it up. And we're going to turn one side into a kind of a root shape. So we're going to kind of make it a little bit skinnier on one side. And how this is going to look, we will attach it in series with a few others to our toilet paper roll with a little leading off kind of root base. So we're going to make a few of these, similar size, different kind of crinkle structures. Of course, they're never all going to be exactly the same, which is good, and then we will have enough to start gluing it together. This is where we need to be really careful not to burn ourselves. But just to get a good idea of how to get started, we're going to carefully press this against our stump-based toilet paper roll. Lump in our root base here. All right, there's one. And we're just gonna keep doing that ad nauseum. Okay, so now we have all of our tendrily pieces attached. Now, if you want to get more creative, you can do put your tendrils in on an angle, so you get kind of a twisty looking tree. And this is kind of like the basic starter point if you want to just try it out before you get too crazy. So you can kind of see our basic stump structure now, nice and shiny. You can go ahead and turn on our glue gun and put it safely out of our way and move on to the next step. We're going to pull out our masking tape. Okay. Now this is a bit wider than normal masking tape you'll find. It just makes it a little bit easier to get coverage, but if you use smaller strips, then you're going to end up with more ability to get on all those nooks and crannies. So now we're just going to take our tape and cover every single bit of our structure. So now completely covered in masking tape. So I'm doing a little final look through to see if I can't see any shiny through. Missed a spot, there's strange gaps. So clearly a little bit of a lengthy process, but now you can clearly see our structure for our stump and our big wild roots sticking out. Now, as we were messing with it, things aren't sitting exactly how they were when we first kind of designed our armature. So, good thing is, it's aluminum foil, so you can keep on playing with it. This one wants to loop back to this one. This one's no longer touching the ground at all, which is kind of strange. So we'll push it back. Wiggle, wiggle. Little tiny gap there. Strip. And this is our first big step. We now have our shape. So our next step takes a little bit more prep. We are going to start paper mache. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video now and get some things prepped, and then we will start part 2. Welcome back to part 2, where we're going to start our paper mache of our little stump. So first things first, I actually did some prep work before we got here because it takes a bit of time. You're going to start with your paper towels. I use Viva mostly because when I was first researching how to do this project a year ago for a different reason, I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials on various kinds of paper clay and paper mache, and one person recommended paper towels rather than newspaper because you can get a really cool like wrinkling effect from it, and also it has a kind of neat texture. Viva specifically kind of looks like bark when it's on there, nice and rough but without any quilted patterns from the more premium brands. So highly recommend Viva. You can find it at your dollar store. It's thankfully one of the most inexpensive kinds, so if you're looking for a specific brand, Viva. If you don't want to waste paper towels, understandable, you can still do this with newspaper, but I do not get a newspaper, and I actually don't know very many people who do. So I find that newspaper is much harder to get a hold of, and other papers don't really have the structural integrity to do paper mache. So highly recommend you go with your paper towels. So I took this specific kind of Viva that has the kind of half sheets. So you start off with this shape, and then I ended up cutting it in a couple different ways because you'll see as we go you're going to have different needs for different wiggles and squiggles in parts of your tree. So first off, cut it lengthwise, or hot dog wise if you want to call it that way. Get these nice long strips, which we'll start with. Then I cut some of those strips in half, so we get these kind of short but kind of wide. And then I also did even smaller ones by cutting it this direction. So if I was calling this hot dog, I guess this would be, no wait, that would be hot dog. Whatever, you know what I mean. Cut this way. Oh boy, forgetting my jargon, hot dog versus hamburger. All right, so you got your paper towels, you got them cut into various sizes. I'm gonna go ahead and put my tree out of my way. Next up, Elmers school glue. I bought it in a big jug because you need kind of a lot, especially if you're gonna try to do this with more than just a stump. If you want to do a bigger tree, I will show you pictures. Hopefully I can edit it in, or I'll show it at the end, of a project I did doing this technique with a milk carton. So like a half-gallon milk carton. You can make a very big tree that way. And you can, I don't know if you guys are geeks like me, but it's a really cool platform or way to make something for Dungeons and Dragons, or if you just like fairy doors, we've heard of like fairy door setups, or just, you know, any kind of shadow box or diorama where you want a spooky tree. So that's a lot bigger. You can make it so that you can have little figurines live inside it and cut it, and I actually lit it as well. So if you think this is a cool project and you really want to go all out, I would highly recommend buying the very large jug of white glue. This particular one I bought at Target for $10. You can find it at specialty stores like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, but it tends to be about twice as expensive. So if I were you, I would look in the school sections at Target or Walmart or Dollar Store, might have it as well. I mean, obviously it's everywhere. So we're gonna start with our white glue. Ooh, I just shook everything. And it's generally recommended that it's 2 parts white glue to 1 part water. I'm terrible at measuring. I just kind of stir it until I'm happy with it. So I'll add a little bit in, and I'm just using a palette knife, but you can be less fancy and use anything, really. Use your hands if you want. You're gonna get them covered in it anyway. I won't judge you. So this is a nice consistency. It thins it out a little bit, but still not as thin as water. All right, time to dunk. No going back, now I'm messy. All right, dunk it in. Make sure it's on all of our little corners. You don't want any sad, dry corners. We're gonna kind of squeeze out a lot of it. If it wrinkles, that's fine. We're going for a wrinkly old tree. All right, so now I'm gonna start the top of one of my squiggly root sections. Now you can see that I have it going inside a bit. Let me push it up actually a little bit more. You have some time, you don't have to rush this. I'm actually going to go for a twist here. And kind of scrunch it up a little bit. Press into all of our folds. Have that lovely bark texture will come out as everything dries. And this is going to take a while to dry. So if you are working on the kitchen table, apologize to your fam, because you have to figure out a place to put it or move it before dinner time. All right, so that's one twisty little root. And you see we have a little bit of a gap. That's okay. We can fill that with our little pieces. But first I'm gonna get as much of this big strip stuff done. Dunk in our glue. Squeeze. Okay. See how it kind of organically has a little bit of a fold to it. Now I'm going the same direction as I did with my first strip, but you don't have to. Roots don't necessarily have all of the ridges going the same direction. You see I'm a little bit short, so we're going to take one of our little tiny guys. It's a little bit long, but if we want, we can actually end up cutting off the ends once they're dry if we don't like how they ended up looking. And now the hard part is over. All right, I will see you after a while. This could take usually about a day to dry, so I'll see you in a day or two. Hello, welcome back. It's been a couple days. Our stump took about 48 hours to dry completely. This is our final look. Kind of looks like a strange sea creature at the moment, but today we're going to put some paint on it. And this is probably going to be a kind of a lengthy process as well. We're going to paint it a couple different colors to layer it. I'm showing you a basic darks to lights, like kind of natural looking. If you remember my pictures I posted before, similar to that. You can do whatever you want. So say you don't have black paint, or you don't have any brown paint, but you have lots of blues and purples and gem tones that look really cool together. Do a kind of fantasy forest looking tree stump. You can go for full Disney, right? Disney tends to have a lot of purple and blue tones in their forests when they're doing spooky. So you can go full spooky that way, but I'm going to show you the basics on how to get it somewhat natural looking. Maybe another day I'll do a photo or like a video tutorial on how to do it kind of fantasy. So first off, I'm going to start with painting this guy black. And you could do an undercoating of black for any paint job you do. This way you just get all of those nooks and crannies super dark. So I'm starting with a chip brush. And so, sorry, my cat really wants to be, come on, Bast. Oh, okay. All right, moving on. Okay, so we're starting with obviously a paint that I've used before. This is just Valspar Season Flex. It's a flat exterior black paint. Cheapest by volume if you're going to do a lot of things the same color, or you know, a lot of projects use black. Get a quart from your local big box store. It's, you know, I can't remember how much this costs, but it's probably costs the same amount as one of my little acrylic bottles. So this is going to go a lot farther than this is. This is my, you know, everyday painting. This is my big projects, and I would consider this a somewhat big project. So black paint in a quart. You can go to these stores like Lowe's and Home Depot and get even smaller sample things. The other colors we're going to use are different browns, and I'll show you those. I'm actually going to use my smaller, fancier paints for that. But you can go get little sample jars that are only a couple dollars. You can get quarts. It's just a lot cheaper this way. And then you can do many, many different projects with it, or just scale this project way up like we talked about before. So this is just a chip brush. It's inexpensive, less than $1 if you buy them in bulk packs. This is going to be my main brush for this. You'll see this is going to be messy, so make sure you have your paper or something underneath it. I also have this tiny guy for when I need to get individual specific spots, or when I want to paint inside our little stump hole here. Let's start. The easiest way to get into nooks and crannies is actually to make sure you have plenty of water on your brush and your paint. I have my little, I'm using a paper plate as a kind of palette, mostly so I have some place to put my big brush, and then if I want to get some of the water out, I can. I've got some paper towels in case things get a little out of hand, but you want to keep quite a bit of water on your brush and with your paint so you can get into those nooks and crannies a lot better. So I just dip water, dip paint, get a nice watered down paint consistency. All right, so get into those nooks and crannies. Okay, here we go. It's all done. We're gonna wait for it to dry. It's gonna take a couple hours, and then we will look forward to painting some browns on here. All right, see you later. Okay, we are back. Time to paint some browns. Now I have chosen a couple browns that I'm gonna use going from darker to lighter, and we're gonna do a kind of dry brushing technique. But first we're gonna go pretty solid with our darkest brown. So using my same paper plate, just gonna squeeze a little bit out. This is super dark. It's gonna dry even darker. You don't have to be too careful about getting into nooks and crannies. Get a counter going for how many times I say nooks and crannies. Okay, so we're gonna get our same paintbrush, and we're gonna go kind of lightly. We don't want to cover up all of our black, though black is not a natural color. So you want to get, you know, large areas of it covered, but leaving all of that shadow darkness. And there we go, we're all done. We're just gonna let this dry. So you can kind of see that it's picking up some of that texture from our lovely paper towels. And it looks very bark-like, especially some areas. Got a lot of character to it. Right, as we add more layers of lighter and lighter browns, we're gonna get more and more of that texture showing through. And yeah, it's gonna look more and more natural and more like bark. Now our initial brown coat has dried. As you can see, it's a little bit browner, but not much. It's very, very dark still. Our next step is going to be a slightly lighter brown. And you can accomplish this by just adding a little bit of white into your first brown. If you only want to have one brown, or you only do have one brown, that's fine. Just add a little bit of white and keep adding more and more white to get lighter and lighter colors as we get a little bit brighter on our stump. So right now I'm going to go with a burnt umber. So I'm going to take my brown, put it on my paper plate palette. Maybe. This isn't as light as I was hoping. How about we mix them together? That sounds like a good idea. Or I could have just added some white. Okay, so now we're gonna do our dry brush technique. Dry brushing is basically you use minimal amount of paint on your brush. Obviously you have quite a lot glooped on there since we use it to mix, and then you paint lightly so that you're only picking up the kind of highlights, things that stick out the most, to bring out that kind of bark texture in our paper towels. But since this is still one of our undercoats, we're going to be a little bit heavier handed than we would on some of our lighter colors. So you'll see we're going to get lighter and lighter with our color and lighter with our painting touch. we finished this layer, and even though it's a little bit wet, it's drying pretty fast and it's pretty tacky, so I'm going to go ahead and add white to my little mixture I made up on the fly. That is another color of brown, all done. You can see that it's picked up a lot of the highlights on it. See a lot more detail. It makes it look more and more like a gnarled old tree stump. Cat's meowing in the background. Oh God. I'm gonna add a little bit more white to my color and do another coat. And that's it. We're done with browns and a little bit of white in there. So you can see I did just kind of the tops of our sticky outy bits, right? Just like our individual sections. I did the top of that with the even lighter color and places that I really wanted to emphasize. So you can see it looks pretty good. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope that you end up with an adorable little diorama of spooky trees. And on to the next project, I guess.